The smell was the first thing I noticed. Not the aroma of breakfast, not my mother's perfume. It was smoke, thick, hot, suffocating. I jumped up, my heart pounding in my throat. The orange light flickering beneath my bedroom door felt like something out of a nightmare. A second later, I heard the crack. Something was burning, and it was inside the house. I flung open the door, my eyes still blurry, and saw something I couldn't believe. In the backyard, my mother, in her nightgown, was stoking a makeshift fire with my clothes. Pants, blouses, jackets, pieces of my identity being swallowed by the flames. I froze. I felt my stomach drop, as if I'd fallen off a building. "What are you doing?" My voice trembled. She looked at me like I was crazy for asking, as if it were natural. "Making room," she said, her voice cold, her eyes never leaving the flames. "Your sister needs room in her suitcase." I couldn't process it. My sister was going away, but why did that mean destroying everything I owned? Why did my things have to turn to ash so she could have comfort? The scene felt like a ritual. The clothes burned slowly, the smoke rising as if carrying away pieces of my history. These were clothes I'd bought with the little money I'd saved. Each piece carried memories: the shirt from the first concert I went to, the sweatshirt I wore when I was sick and my grandmother took care of me. Now they were becoming nothing, just smoke. And my mother, she watched it all as if she were watering plants, without emotion, without regret. And worse, my sister stood there, arms crossed, as if she were the mistress of the house. She didn't say a word. She didn't protest. She just watched. This killed me more than the fire. The silent complicity. The certainty that, to them, I was the one who could be discarded. Share this story to reach further. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video on WhatsApp. And leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. The smell of smoke clung to me, but it was the contempt in my mother's eyes that really burned. And it was only the beginning. It wasn't the first time I'd felt left out. Ever since I was little, my mother always had a strange sparkle in her eyes when she talked about my sister. I noticed it in the exaggerated praise, the disguised comparisons, the excuses she made for everything she did. With me, it was demanding. With her, it was patience. I always had to earn my space. My sister, she simply had it. I remember one birthday I had when I asked for a simple party. My mother said we didn't have the money. Months later, she organized a trip to Disney for my sister's birthday. "It was an opportunity," she said. But what hurt wasn't the trip. It was the casualness with which they ignored my wishes, as if it were obvious that I should understand, as if I were being ungrateful for feeling. I grew up trying to fit in, doing everything right. Good grades, obedient, helpful. It was never enough. My sister could break rules, slam doors, disappear for days, and still, my mother defended her. They said I was more mature, so they expected more of me. But that maturity was just another word for abandonment. I was the invisible daughter, the silent support of the favorite daughter. My dad tried to balance things out, but he worked too much. When he was around, things seemed less unfair. But most of the time, it was just me, my mom, and my sister. A lopsided triangle where I was always left out. My mom said I was dramatic. You see the problem in everything. But how can you not when your clothes are on fire in the backyard and they say it's making room? That morning, as I watched my clothes turn to ash, I understood. The favoritism was no longer disguised. It was declared, branded in the fire. The choice had been made, and it wasn't for me. After the bonfire, everything fell silent. Not the peaceful kind. It was a heavy, uncomfortable silence, the kind that screams louder than words. I tried to confront my mother, but she turned away as if I were a passing inconvenience. "Enough, you're making too much drama," she said, washing her hands as if to wash away the guilt along with the soot. I stood there, with the taste of ash in my mouth. I went to my father, expecting some reaction. I told him everything, every detail. The clothes, the fire, the absurd justification for the suitcase. He frowned, seemed surprised for a moment, but then quickly tried to downplay it. "Your mother must have had a reason. Let's not exaggerate. That broke me. I didn't want war. I just wanted someone to admit it was wrong. But once again, my feelings were delegitimized. At school, I tried to vent to a friend. She listened silently, and then let out a nervous laugh. Seriously? She really burned herself? Damn. Your mom's crazy. She tried to change the subject right away. It wasn't empathy. It was fleeting astonishment. I understood right then that no one really wanted to get involved. and that when pain is invisible to most, it becomes a joke. My sister, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had happened. She continued posting on social media, laughing with her friends, preparing for her dream trip. I watched from afar, feeling like I was being swallowed by a whole. It wasn't just about clothes. It was about value, about what each of us meant to our own mothers. Was I really worth so little? I returned to my room and stared at the empty closet. The open space, conquered by fire, felt like a morbid trophy. I sat on the bed and cried. It wasn't a loud cry. It was a silent, choked cry, the kind that comes from deep within. I didn't know what else to do. I only knew that no one wanted to hear my side, and that hurt more than any material loss. The damn bag sat in the living room for days. Red, new, enormous. It was impossible not to notice. Every time I passed it, I felt a lump in my throat. It wasn't just a bag. It was a physical reminder of what had been done to me. It was the space that had been ripped away from me by force, by fire, by neglect. That bag became a symbol of the imbalance within our home. My mother organized it carefully. She folded each of my sister's clothes as if preparing an altar. She placed loving notes, favorite chocolates, even a necklace from my grandmother, something that, theoretically, was supposed to be shared between the two of us. "She'll miss us," my mother said. I swallowed hard. Who missed me anyway? Who thought of me? I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. The bag haunted me. It was mentioned constantly. The trip, the preparations, the goodbyes. It was as if the house was dedicated to my sister. And me? Invisible. A shadow no one noticed. This began to eat away at me. I was living in a home that insisted on reminding me every day that I wasn't a priority. One night, I found myself staring at my suitcase for almost an hour. Quiet, unmoving. I wanted to throw it away, hide it, scream, but I didn't. Because, deep down, I knew no one would care. Maybe they'd even blame me for ruining my sister's special moment. It was always like that. I was the party pooper, the one who can't be happy for others. That morning, something inside me broke completely. I realized that suitcase represented everything that was wrong. All the love I wasn't receiving, all the justice that was never served, all the pain that was swept under the rug, and it was impossible to ignore it any longer. I gathered my courage and sat with my mother. I waited for her to finish the coffee. I waited for her to put away the dishes. I waited for everything, because I knew any interruption would be used against me. When I finally spoke, my voice trembled, but I didn't hesitate. "You hurt me. Burning my clothes. There's no justification." She looked at me, took a deep breath, and replied coldly, "You always exaggerate." I tried to reason with her, to remind her of the times I'd made an effort, the times I'd been forgotten. I talked about the clothes, yes, but also the pain, the feeling of being discarded, and she simply shrugged. "Your sister is going to study abroad. It's an important moment. You should be happy for her." It was as if I were selfish for wanting respect, as if what I felt was irrelevant. Then I said in so many words, "You don't love me the same way." The sentence hung in the air, heavy, impossible to ignore. For a moment, I thought she would get emotional, try to explain, apologize, but no. She just replied, "You complicate things too much." That's when I understood. The problem wasn't that I wasn't loved, it was that she would never admit it. I got up from the table with shaky legs. That wasn't a simple disagreement. It was the end of an attempt. I'd spent years trying to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. And in that moment, I realized there would be no change. There would be no recognition. My mother didn't see me as a daughter. She saw me as a function, as someone who must endure, be silent, understand. I went back to my room and started writing. Not messages, not posts, but thoughts. I needed to organize the pain, get it out of me, even if it was on paper. For the first time, I wrote the sentence I never wanted to accept. My mother chose me to lose, and it hurt, but it also freed. I stopped expecting from her what she never wanted to give me. The day of the trip arrived. The house was in a festive mood. Balloons, cake, even family members came to say goodbye. My mother was beaming, as if her daughter were going to NASA. I watched from the sidelines, trying not to appear bitter, but inside, I was crumbling. It was as if my pain had been erased from history, replaced by forced smiles and backslapping. My sister, dressed like a catalog model, hugged everyone with that calculated smile. When she saw me, she came to me with a cold hug. "I hope you're okay," she said, as if I were an abandoned pet. There was no affection, no empathy. She knew what our mother had done, and she chose silence. That choice said it all. My mother wept with emotion. My daughter, the pride of the family. I held back tears, not out of longing, but because of everything it symbolized. She wasn't just leaving. She was being celebrated for taking the place that had always been denied to me, and everyone around her reinforced this. No one saw what I saw. No one felt what I felt. When the car arrived to take her to the airport, I locked myself in my room. I didn't say goodbye, not out of spite, out of self-protection. I couldn't stand being a spectator to my own exclusion any longer. I turned up the music, sat on the floor, and cried again. Not because of the goodbye, but because of the realization that, even without her there, the favoritism would continue to haunt me. It was then that I knew something inside me had died, a part that still hoped for change, a part that still believed that in time, everything would work out. My sister's departure wasn't just a trip. It was a trigger, a turning point. I could no longer pretend everything was okay. After my sister left, the house became strangely quieter, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was suffocating, the kind of silence that weighs on your shoulders, that watches you, that reminds you every second that something is broken. My mother barely spoke to me. We walked through the hallways like two strangers sharing the same roof, but not the same world. The days dragged on. The messages in the family group were all about my sister. She's arrived safely. She's already fitting in. Look at this beautiful photo she posted. I watched it all silently. Each notification was like a small stab, reinforcing that, once again, I was the extra in other people's stories. I wasn't even mentioned. No one asked about me. I began to sleep poorly. I had nightmares about fire, suitcases, and cold eyes staring at me. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night, thinking I was trapped, suffocated. The emptiness of my closet still gave me chills. It was a daily reminder of everything I'd lost, and how my grief had been treated as an exaggeration. My mother's indifference now made me silently ill, until one day, without planning, I exploded. My mother made a silly comment about how the house felt lighter without my sister, as if everything was in harmony now. I laughed, but it was a crooked, bitter laugh, and then it all came out. I screamed, not just with my voice, but with everything I had stored away. I screamed at the clothes, at the abandonment, at the comparison, at the oblivion. My mother looked at me, startled, as if she were seeing a stranger. "You're losing your mind," she said. But no, I was regaining my mind. That wasn't a fit. It was a scream that had been bottled up for years and finally found its way out. For the first time, she had to listen, even if she didn't want to, even if she pretended not to understand. That same night, I sat with my father. He came home from work exhausted, as always, but he saw my face and knew it wasn't time to wait. I told him everything. No frills, no holding back. He listened. For the first time, he really listened. He didn't try to minimize it, didn't say I was exaggerating. He remained silent, his eyes welling up, and that broke me inside. "You don't deserve to live like this," he said. "You need to breathe." I nodded, afraid of the decision already made within me. I was leaving, not out of pride, not out of anger, but out of survival. I could no longer live in an environment where being ignored was the norm, where the fire was more respected than my presence. I spent the next few days organizing everything in secret. I gathered what little was left, scraped together some savings, and asked a friend for help. I planned every detail. My mother didn't notice. She was too busy sending videos of my sister on WhatsApp. I was invisible even when I was leaving. On the day of my departure, I left a note. Not out of drama, but because I needed to end it with dignity. I'm tired of asking to be seen. Now I choose to see myself. I left with my heart racing, but feeling light. I didn't know what awaited me, but any place was better than where my worth was burned along with my clothes. When I closed the gate, I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd done it too many times. There comes a time when we realize that continuing to expect love from someone who discards us is a slow way to destroy ourselves. And I wasn't going to destroy myself for anyone anymore. In those first days away from home, freedom was bittersweet. I could breathe without fear, walk without judgment, make choices without seeking approval. But I also felt an emptiness that silently followed me. The absence of familiar noise, however toxic, left an echo. I was free, yes, but I was also alone. I lived with a friend for a while. She welcomed me warmly, offered me a room, a plate of food, and something I hadn't received in a long time. listening. She didn't try to solve my pain. She just validated it. "You have every right to be this way," she'd say. And that, for me, was more than I'd ever received from my own mother. Sometimes I would cry out of the blue. In the shower, when I saw a blouse similar to the one that had been burned, or when I heard a song that used to play at home. The freedom was too new, too strange. My body hadn't yet unlearned its fear. I still found myself apologizing for the smallest things, for taking up space, for existing. As if I were still there, under the same roof that had erased me. I started working part-time at a coffee shop. It wasn't much, but it made me feel useful, alive. Every cup of coffee served, every customer served, reminded me that I could build something of my own. Little by little, I came back to myself. It didn't hurt any less, but it hurt differently. It hurt with purpose, and that made all the difference. It was one of those days, coming home from work, that I noticed something new in the mirror. My eyes still held pain, but they also held strength. For the first time, I saw myself as someone who survived, who emerged from the fire and chose to live, even with the scars. Almost 2 months later, I received an unexpected call. It was my sister. My heart froze for a second. I considered not answering, but something inside me wanted to know why. Why, after so long in silence, had she decided to talk to me? I answered cautiously, my voice low, my chest tight. "Hi," was all I could say. She was different too. Her voice trembled, a rare thing for her. "I need to talk to you." I remained silent, waiting. She began to vent. She said the trip wasn't going as expected, that the loneliness was hurting, that the demands were greater than she imagined. For the first time, my sister sounded human, fragile, real. "I thought it would be easy," she confessed, "but I realized how unfair I was to you. I knew what our mother did, and I kept quiet." That stopped me. I hadn't expected an apology, much less that one. I felt a lump in my throat. I didn't know whether to feel anger or relief, maybe both, but I let her continue. She cried. She said that for the first time she understood what it was like to feel alone, invisible, and that now she could imagine, albeit belatedly, what it was like to have lived like that for so long. I didn't respond right away. I needed to digest it. My heart, even wounded, was still capable of compassion, but I was also fair to myself. I wouldn't rush to forgive. We ended the call with a silence unlike any other between us before. It wasn't a wall. It was a bridge under construction. For the first time, she wanted to cross, and even though I still didn't know if she would open the door, the mere fact that she had knocked changed everything. A few days after my sister's call, it was my mother who showed up. She didn't call. She didn't text. She simply showed up at the coffee shop where I worked. When I saw her walk through the door, the world seemed to stop for a few seconds. The tray almost fell from my hands. She'd never come to see me before. She'd never made a point. Why now? She waited for me to leave the counter. She was serious, but not as arrogant as usual. When I sat down across from her, I could tell she was trying to contain her emotions. "Are you okay?" she asked. I almost laughed. 2 months without contact, and that was it? "I'm alive," I replied. She lowered her eyes. For the first time, my mother didn't seem in control, and that confused me. Then she started talking. She didn't apologize right away. She started by trying to justify herself. She said she was stressed, that she wanted to please everyone, that it had never been easy raising 2 such different daughters. She spoke as if trying to rewrite history with pretty words, but I remembered the smell of smoke, the pain, the nights crying alone. I told her to stop. "You don't need to make excuses. I know what happened, and I haven't forgotten." My voice was firm, surprisingly firm. I saw the shock in her eyes, perhaps because, for the first time, I wasn't begging for love. I was asserting myself, and that changed everything in that moment. Then she stopped talking. She took a deep breath and said, "I messed up. Big time." Silence. "And I don't know if you'll forgive me, but I wanted to hear you. Just hear you." I didn't know what to say. For so long, I'd been ignored. And now, suddenly, my voice mattered? Was it too late? Maybe. But it was also the first time she'd made space, and it paralyzed me. After that encounter, something in me changed. I didn't feel happy or relieved, but I felt that, for the first time, I had a choice. I could say yes or no, accept or refuse, and that was real freedom. I went back to my friend's house and cried. Again, but it was different. It was a cleansing cry, of someone beginning to release a weight they'd carried for too long. I started writing every day. My notebook became my safe space. I wrote down memories, pains, desires, plans, and I realized that writing made me exist again. It was like sewing my own story with my own hands, without needing anyone to see me to feel real. I am, and always have been. Over time, I rebuilt my wardrobe, piece by piece, not just of clothing, but of identity. Every choice was my own, without imposition, without fear of disappointing anyone. Relearning to like myself was a slow but necessary process, and little by little, I began to recognize myself in the mirror. The scar was still there, but it no longer hurt. It was just a reminder that I survived, that I was rejected, and yet I continued, that I was burned inside, but I was reborn, not by miracle, but by choice. The choice not to abandon myself when everyone else did, the choice to keep going, even without knowing where it would lead. And that, for me, was the greatest proof of strength. Today, when I think about everything I've been through, I no longer feel anger. I feel respect for myself, for the girl who cried alone in her room, for the young woman who faced the fire and came out alive, for the woman who chose not to accept crumbs, and for the daughter who learned that not all love comes from family, but that she still deserves all of it. A few weeks later, my mother called me to talk, not in a cafe, not in a public place. She wanted me to return to the old house, the place where it all began, the place where it all burned. I took a deep breath before accepting. Going back there meant facing ghosts, but it also meant facing head-on the pain I'd always tried to avoid, and I was ready. I walked in slowly, my heart racing. The familiar scent hit me like an avalanche. Memories came rushing back. The room where I cried, the hallway where we were strangers, the backyard where my clothes were destroyed. She sat waiting for me, alone. No makeup, no pose. For the first time, my mother looked human and scared. "I wanted to show you something," she said, struggling to her feet. She led me to her old room. On the bed were all the things she'd managed to save from the fire. Some still smelled of smoke, others were damaged. I kept them. I didn't have the heart to throw them all away. "I regret it every day," she said, her eyes welling up. She began to cry, not with rehearsed guilt, but with real pain. I repeated what they did to me. My mother erased me too, and I did the same to you. Hearing that disarmed me. I'd always wanted an explanation, but I'd never expected such a raw confession. For a moment, I saw the woman behind the mother figure, hurt, confused, lost. We were silent. I didn't hug her, but I didn't leave either. That scene was the final confrontation. No screams, no attacks. It was the truth exposed, naked, raw, and for the first time, without denial. There, face to face with my greatest pain, I didn't feel small. I felt whole, because I was no longer trying to be accepted. I just was, with everything I'd experienced. After that day, I returned home with a heavy but clearer heart. It was like lifting a backpack full of stones from my back. I didn't forgive her then and there. Forgiveness isn't a key you turn all at once, but I took the first step, a step toward myself, not for her, but for myself, for everything I needed to let go. I spent days thinking about that scene, the clothes I'd saved, the tears, the words I'd waited to hear for years, and I realized that part of what hurt me came from the lack of closure, from never having heard I messed up. Now that I had, the wound began to heal. It didn't close completely, but for the first time, it didn't bleed when touched. I decided to write a text and publish it. No names, no exposure, just my story. I needed to get it off my chest, and when I posted it, something magical happened. Hundreds of people started commenting. They said, "It's like you've told my life story. I was also the invisible daughter. Thank you for giving voice to this pain." I was no longer alone. My story, which caused me so much suffering, became a bridge between me and other hurting people, between the silent girl and the woman who writes, between pain and healing. Each comment was a piece of my reconstruction, and I understood that, even without the perfect ending, I was creating a new beginning, one where I was seen, felt, and read. And one of those days, I looked in the mirror again. I smiled, for the first time in a long time, without pain, deep down, just lightness, because I finally understood that carrying what had been burned was no longer my obligation. From that moment on, I chose to carry on lightly, with my story, with my scars, but most importantly, with my freedom. Today, I look back with a different kind of pain, a mature pain. It no longer angers me, but it doesn't numb me either. It's a vivid reminder of everything I had to go through to get here. I wasn't the chosen daughter, and for a long time, I believed that meant I was worthless, that I had to beg to be loved, but I was wrong. Being the unchosen one forced me to choose myself, to build my place, even without being invited, to rise up even without applause, and that made me a strong woman, not cold, not bitter, but resilient, with a whole heart, even after being broken. I didn't become a better person despite what I experienced. I became a better person because I faced it all head on. My mother still exists in my life, but in a new way, without expectations, without idealizations. Today, I see her as a flawed woman, trying to get things right too late. It's no longer up to me to try to heal her pain. I have my own, and only now, after everything, do I have the space to treat her with the affection no one ever gave me. My sister and I are slowly getting closer, still cautiously, still with shadows from the past, but with a genuine desire to do things differently. She listens to me now, and that, in itself, breaks a cycle. It's not about forgetting. It's about transformation, about picking up the pieces and building something new, my way, in my time. The girl who saw her clothes turn to ash now wears armor made of self-love, and that no one can burn. I'm no longer an invisible daughter. I'm the woman who saw herself when no one else wanted to. And that's why, today, I sleep in peace, with my space, with my story, with my freedom. If this story touched you in any way, I want to ask you a favor with all my heart. Share this video now with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we carry such similar wounds and don't even know it. It could be your friend, your sister, a family member, or even yourself. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who has ever felt left out, ignored, invisible in their own home. Subscribe to the channel to continue following real, intense, profound stories like this one. Here we talk about pain, overcoming, self-love, unfiltered, unromanticized, just the way life is. And every time you subscribe, like, and comment, this message goes further. It reaches more hearts. And that makes all the difference. Also share on WhatsApp, in family, college, and work groups. Who knows? Maybe this story will open an eye, heal a wound, spark an important conversation. Sometimes, it's by listening to another person's pain that we begin to heal our own. And leave a comment about where you're watching or listening from. I read them all, one by one, and every city, every country, every little piece of this world that connects through these stories shows me that pain can separate, but the truth, when spoken with courage, unites. Thank you for being here. And always remember, you don't need to be chosen by anyone to have value. When you choose yourself, no one else can erase you.